Welcome to the Sex Science Podcast, where we turn the latest peer-reviewed research on intimacy and sexuality into fun, accessible conversations. Generated by AI and fact-checked by experts, the Sex Science Podcast was created by LaShaw to empower you through knowledge. So, join us as we explore pleasure, relationships, human connection, and everything in between.
Welcome to Your Deep Dive. You want to get a better grasp on the different types of love and how they're experienced? Well, guess what? We're heading over to Finland for this one. Some fascinating research.
Yeah, we're going to be diving into a 2023 study from philosophical psychology called Body Maps of Loves. And these researchers, they actually mapped out 27 different kinds of love.
27.
Everything from romantic love to even love of wisdom to see how they are felt, not just in the mind, but in the body too.
Oh, okay. So they mapped out feelings. That's pretty ambitious. How'd they even go about doing that?
Well, they used some pretty clever methods to map these love types. They had people color in body diagrams to show where they felt the love. They had them rate the intensity, pleasantness, all that kind of stuff. And they even had them group different love words by how similar they felt.
So it's not just about whether you feel it in your heart or your head. It's about the whole body.
Exactly. One of the big takeaways here is that love isn't just some vague feeling up in your head. It's experienced all throughout the body. And the intensity, well, that can vary a lot depending on the type of love.
That makes sense. I'd guess passionate love would probably feel different physically than, let's say, love for your neighbor.
You are right on the money. The study found passionate love and true love as well were felt very strongly and widely across the body. Whereas weaker forms of love, things like moral love or practical love, those were experienced more subtly and in a smaller area of the body.
So it's like a spectrum of intensity. Huh. Were there any areas of the body that lit up for most of the types of love?
Yeah, actually, almost every type of love they looked at triggered sensations in the head and the chest.
Head and chest. That's interesting. Makes me think about how we usually associate the head with thoughts and the heart with feelings.
Yeah, it's a great connection. But what's even more intriguing is how the study challenges the traditional notion of love as this, single uniform emotion. It seems like there are many subcategories of love.
So rather than just falling in love, maybe it's more like we fall into a certain type of love.
That's a great way to put it. And the study, it offers some really fascinating insights into how these different types of love, how they cluster together.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
Tell me about these clusters.
All right, so they found two main clusters: interpersonal love, directed at other people, and then love for ideas and non-human animals.
That seems pretty intuitive. We probably experience love differently for our partner compared to, say, our love of music.
Exactly. And you know what? Within the interpersonal cluster, the romantic love types, they were all tightly grouped together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they all had very similar patterns in the body maps.
So romantic love, passionate love, that kind of thing, they all share a similar feeling profile.
Precisely. And love for family was also clustered closer than, say, love for friends or neighbors.
So, for example, love for your child felt more similar to love for your sibling than, say, love for your neighbor. Interesting. So does that mean closeness really does influence how we experience love?
This study definitely suggests that. Actually, the researchers even found a connection between the intensity of love and biological salience.
Right. That makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. I mean, those are the loves that are essential for keeping humanity going.
Exactly. And then as you move further away from those core biological drives, the intensity, it seems to diminish. The love you feel for your child, that's probably going to be a lot stronger than the love you feel for, say, a casual acquaintance.
Like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
The closer the relationship, the bigger the wave of emotion.
I love that analogy.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, it really does make you think differently about love. We often think about it as this abstract thing, but it really does have an impact on our bodies.
It's like we're walking, talking emotion maps.
Yeah, that is one of the fascinating things about this research. Remember, they mapped out 27 different types of love.
Okay, so tell me more about these love maps. What were some of the highlights?
Well, like we said, passionate love and true love, those lit up pretty much the whole body. But you also see love, activating specific areas too. For example, sexual love was strongly associated with, sensations in the genital area.
Makes sense. What about some of the other types of love? Were there any surprises in the body maps?
Definitely. Love of wisdom and love for strangers, for example, those were primarily experienced in the head.
Oh, really?
It could reflect the fact that these types of love are often associated with, contemplation or thought. and perhaps a bit more distance. It's interesting to think about how the physical experience kind of mirrors the nature of the love itself.
It makes me wonder if our bodies are giving us these subtle clues about the different shades of love that we're feeling.
That's a great point. And it brings up another key point, which is that all these maps are based on average responses, right? Individual experiences, those can vary.
So my love of wisdom body map might look different from yours or from someone else. I mean, we're all unique.
Exactly. The study, it provides this really fascinating framework, but it's important to keep in mind that our own personal experiences of love, well, those are multifaceted.
Did they look at anything besides location?
They did. They also asked people to rate each type of love on a number of different dimensions, like how pleasant it was, how much control they felt over it, and how much they associated it with touch.
Okay, so what did those ratings tell us? Spill the tea.
Well, like you might expect, the loves that ranked highest for positive feelings were sexual, romantic, and reciprocal love.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any surprises in the data?
One that stood out to me was that people felt they had the least control over loves related to kinship,
Okay.
like a parent's love for their child, for example.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Seems to point to how powerful and instinctive those bonds are. What about the other end of the spectrum? What did people feel like they had the most control over?
Self-love was the one that people felt they had the most control over,
Interesting.
which is interesting to consider.
Definitely. I'm curious, though, about the different ways people experience love based on who or what the object of their affection is. Did they find anything interesting there?
Yeah, they found that the intensity of the feeling seemed to be connected to how much physical touch people associated with that specific type of love.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like we often express love through touch.
Right, and the types of love that were rated highly in terms of bodily sensations, so things like sexual, passionate, romantic love, those were also strongly associated with touch.
So the more intense and intimate the love is, the more our bodies seem to mirror that.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Interesting. Conversely, I guess the loves that felt more weakly and weren't associated with touch were love for strangers or love of wisdom.
Exactly.
And those are the ones that were felt more in the head, right? It's amazing to think our bodies could be physically expressing these nuanced differences in types of love. Do they speculate at all about whether there's a biological basis for these different experiences?
That's a question for future research, but the findings do seem to suggest there could be a connection. You know, the research indicates that how intensely we feel love, how attached we feel, and even who or what we love can all influence how we experience love physically.
This has been quite the journey so far.
It really has. We've explored so much, the science behind love, the nuances of the different types, and even how those different types manifest physically.
But what about the tough times when love feels difficult, like heartbreak or unrequited love? Does this research tell us anything about those kinds of experiences?
That's a great question, and it's a great area for, future research. This particular study that we're talking about, it focused on the positive side of love. But there's a lot of value in understanding how our bodies respond to those negative aspects, to grief and to loss.
Yeah, it makes sense that those more difficult emotions would also have a physical impact. It's like when we say, my heart is breaking. We're not just being metaphorical. There's a real feeling there, a physical sensation.
Absolutely.
And understanding those physical responses, that could help us to navigate those difficult times more effectively.
This whole conversation has really opened my eyes to how complex love is. It's not just an abstract feeling. It's this powerful force that shapes our lives on every level.
And the beauty of this research is that it gives us a new way of looking at it all, a new framework for understanding that force. By mapping out the physical side of love, it brings this seemingly intangible emotion into the concrete world, the measurable, the knowable.
It's like we're finally bridging the gap between the science of love and the actual experience of it.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens, when we combine that scientific knowledge with self-awareness. That's when we unlock a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationships and the very nature of love. So listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to explore your own body maps of love. Pay attention to the sensations that come up when you're experiencing different types of love. And remember, the landscape of love, it's vast and it's varied. Embrace that complexity, explore its depths, and never underestimate the power that love has to transform your life.
And if you'd like to learn more about the research we talked about today, you can find a link in the show notes.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Sex Science Podcast brought to you by LaShaw. We hope that you learned something new about the wonderful world of human intimacy and sexuality, and join us next time as we dive into more fascinating research. And remember, science is for you. Music for this podcast was produced by SOUNDRAW.